Sure. Thank you, everybody, for joining. This is our second meeting. Dana, I would like to see the agenda as well. We could talk from that and just try to set the stage for how we're going to flow from here.
Can you guys see it or no?
Not yet.
Okay, hold on. Give me one more second.
Fantastic. Okay, so tonight we are going to see a presentation from the CATS team, a virtual tour of the Blue Line, and some additional details and discussion around the Blue Line. And I think we will hopefully, as a result of that discussion, we'll get a pretty good common understanding of what the LYNX Silver Line would mean for Matthews, and very conceptual, of course. We're not talking about specifics yet in terms of alignment or specific routes. We're talking about conceptually what is going to come to Matthews through the Silver Line. And I think we also want to try to get a common understanding of what is going to happen for the remainder of our task force. So first up is an overview of the prior meeting and approval of the minutes. Susan, Dana, do you want to give us a broad overview of the prior meeting?
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Well, I'm not sure we had 100% attendance. I know we may have been missing a few folks. I think we had a good intro into what we'll be doing for the next, I don't know, 5 to 6 months. Hopefully we'll be able to, this group will help inform the board of what the task force believes is a best locally preferred alternative, commonly known as the LPA. And I think, we had I think a really good meeting, a good intro meeting, and hopefully we'll have a similar meeting tonight in terms of the depth of information. And I will just remind everyone, I appreciate you all emailing me or Susan questions. That was great. And we tried to distribute that blind copy to everyone. So I thought that worked really well. We're going to try to limit the times we send out emails, just to be respectful of your inbox. But we'll try to cluster them all together at the end of the week and send them out if there's anything to send. So with that said, I think we do need to do the approval of minutes, which I believe Shayna sent out.
So first off, did anybody not get a chance to review the minutes that wants to review the minutes before we take a vote? Okay. I did not see any hands go up. Now I'm trying to pin my participant list so I can see everybody. Okay. With that, would anybody like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve the minutes as presented.
There was one typo in the title. Can we amend that one thing?
Certainly could. Could you provide the details for that?
Yeah, I'm sorry, just the word virtual. It was so close to the top. I thought we should probably get that right.
I couldn't agree more. Who would be responsible, Susan or Dana, to make that change, or Shayna?
Yep, that's Shayna's.
Yeah, those are my minutes. I'll make that change.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm sorry, when you make your motion, I can't see the screen because I'm typing at the same time. Can you say your name so I know who you are? There's 15 of you.
Sure. This is Scott Phillips, and with the amendment of the word virtual, would it move to approve the minutes as presented?
This is Jim Johnson. I'll second that motion.
All in favor? Let's see, I think the protocol is we're supposed to go down and call names, right? Susan or
Yes.
Dana, can you? Okay, all right. So I'm just going to go down the list as I see it here in order. Carrie,
Yes.
um, Scott,
Approved.
Andy,
Andy's not a member.
Not a voting member.
okay. Oh, Andy's not a voting member. Okay, Bo,
Approved.
David,
Approved.
Jana,
Yes.
Lou,
Yes.
Lynn,
Approve.
Natasha,
Yes.
Scott,
This is Scott Phillips. I've already approved.
oh, thank you. Okay, Andrew,
Andrew's not a voting member tonight. He's just
Oh,
standing
okay.
in for
All right.
it. Mhm.
J Camp,
I don't think he's a voting member either.
okay. Jim Johnson seconded the motion. And
Yes.
I think that's everybody. And this is Bill Stevens. I approve.
Nope.
Okay. Oh, did I miss somebody?
Yeah, Jennifer. Yes, approved.
Oh, sorry, Jennifer.
That's okay.
And Walter, you too?
Yes, approved.
Thank you, Walter. Apologize. There's Walter. Okay. The names were jumping around on my screen as we were taking the vote, so I apologize if I missed you. Okay. Let's move into a presentation from Katz. Oh, so before we do that, okay, we have a topics and frequency in our last agenda item. We can address the next steps at the end of the meeting. Okay. Thank you.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen so Andy can pick it back up.
All right. Can everyone see the PowerPoint on the screen?
Yes.
Great. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, great. Thank you. So just to give you a brief introduction of who I am, my name is Andy Mock. I'm the Senior Project Manager for the LYNX Silverline. I've been with CATS for 20 years. So in my 20 years, I've worked on both the LYNX Blue Line and Blue Line extension in varying states of planning, design, implementation, construction, activation, and operations. So I've got a long history of experience working on light rail here in Charlotte. So I look forward to being the project manager for the Silverline and putting forward a project that is meets the needs of the community as well as our operations and competes well for federal funding. So thank you for having me. I look forward to being your resource as this body deliberates the alternatives that will be put on the table. So here's just kind of a brief kind of list of topics that I'm going to go over, not quite an agenda, but a list of topics. I'm going to be bouncing back and forth, and I couldn't figure out a way to insert Google Earth into a PowerPoint, so I'm going to have to get out of this PowerPoint and go into Google Earth, and then I'll be back. So first, I'm going to give you a tour of the Blue Line, since I have a lot of experience with that, show you some of the things that are applicable to the town of Matthews, and some things that kind of meet our kind of architectural vocabulary, things that we kind of do consistently. So to give everyone a level of expectation for what you can expect for what our stations look like, the type of stations and configurations that we have, art and transit opportunities. We take a lot of pride in our art treatments of our canopies, our stations, and our walls. So that'll be the first thing to kind of give level set everyone so that they understand what light rail is and what we've done before. Give a brief history of how we got here, and also then an overview of the LYNX Silverline program. Talk about the activities that are going on right now as we advance the Silverline process.
Andy, can you make your screen full view?
I'm getting ready to get out of it. That's why.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So now I'm going to share another one.
One additional request: if everybody could go on mute unless you are talking or asking a question, I think that would help with some of the background noise and dynamics.
Thank you. All right. Google. Can everyone see the Google screen the map in front of you? Does people see that screen?
Not yet.
Okay.
I see the PowerPoint and it says LYNX Blue Line Vitual Tour. There we go. There's
Okay.
the map.
See it now? Okay, thank you. Okay, so as I was talking with Matthew's town staff about some, a Blue Line tour, I kind of was thinking about what stations are most like some of the stations that we're talking about near the downtown Matthews. And so the first one that really came to mind, and also just recognizing that we really don't have a station, a town station. All of our stations are within the city of Charlotte, which have their own context and land use development patterns. So I wasn't able to find a perfect comparison, but we found one that's in what's called South End, and it's the East-West Station. So I'm going to walk through this Google Earth tour. This is the first time I've ever done this, by the way. It's kind of slick how it works. So I'm going to zoom right in. And so this station is a neighborhood walk-up style station. It has no parking. It's really focused on serving and supporting the community in South End Charlotte, as well as the visitors. It's a side station. So you see here, there's two platforms. There's one on this side. This is the northbound platform that goes into Center City. And then there's a platform on the other side, which is a southbound platform. So it has a rail trail behind it. So there's the trail that goes behind the platform. The platform is basically this concrete seam. You can see that. That's the edge of the platform limits. And then there's a rail trail behind it. One of the benefits of a side platform is that it allows you to have development very close to the station, which is something that we like to see. So in certain situations, in fact, this station is getting ready to develop, this parking lot is getting ready to develop into some other use. And they will be able to directly tie into our rail trail right here, providing a real seamless urban environment, something that the city of Charlotte's very focused on. So on our platforms, we always have trees and ticket vending machines, canopies for weather protection. We have common art elements that we build into our platforms, which reflect the community. Some of the common ones are column cladding. You see here, this is some cotton, I believe this is like cotton blooms that were picked up by the artist. And then we also have decorative windscreens. They usually correspond with the community. This one that also is cotton because of the historic context of mills in the South End community. We have all kind of art, and I'll get into the details of that as we go. Skip my next one. So my next one's going to zoom out and just kind of zoom down here and show you the southern side of the platform with an access point across the rail, and then bicycle parking. This is all part and parcel of the LYNX Blue Line rail trail that's very popular. And actually, one of the main components of the Silver Line program is to do a planning effort to identify an end-to-end rail trail program that could be built in concert with the Silver Line. So we see how popular the rail trail is, and we want to start at the beginning and plan that into our design. So our next station isn't quite like what we anticipate for the Matthew station, but it could be something like what we're talking about near Stallings or closer in towards Charlotte, maybe near Sardis Road. And it includes a park and ride. So it's a park and ride lot where people can drive their vehicles right down to the station in the morning. You see a lot of commuter lot. This is my park and ride that I go to. It's the Old Concord Road one. So this is similar. It's a side platform. We also have center platforms that are used in certain contexts. In this case, it made sense for a side platform. And this is one of the Blue Line extension stations, one of our newer stations that we opened in 2018. So it included upgraded amenities for bicycle parking, including its own custom canopy. And it also had a pretty nice art program, including landscaping. I have a better picture of this that shows some cattails and mallard ducks that were welded into the back of the platform. So now I'm zoomed out of Old Concord Road, and I'm zooming into the JW Clay Station, and this is up near UNC Charlotte. This is a parking garage with an ground floor active use space. Again, this is something that we'll be looking at somewhere probably near Stallings or Sardis Road, or maybe along Independence as we work our way in towards Charlotte.
Andy, this is Bill. Your audio is coming through a little bit crackly to me. Is anybody else hearing crackling sounds with Andy's audio?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's see what I can do. I've been trying to get a new laptop. No luck.
It's functional, but it is a little distracting.
Okay, I turned my microphone way up, so maybe if I turn it down, it'll be less. Okay, let's try that.
So far, so good.
Well, I haven't said anything, so hope for the best. So this street view is the picture of the image from North Tryon Street. One of the interesting things with the Blue Line extension is that we rebuilt 4 miles of North Tryon Street, which is an NCDOT road, and incorporated light rail into the median of that street. And that includes a station here at JW Clay. This could be somewhat similar to the LPA, which is planned to go down Monroe Road and rebuild Monroe in a similar type of fashion with light rail and the median. That's the working LPA that we're starting from. In this case, the JB Clay Station has elevator towers and pedestrian bridges from the garages straight down to the tower, through these glass towers, so that you can walk in inclement weather. And I've done this many times. You can stand right here and walk right out and go right down the steps or an elevator right onto the platform and jump on a train. This side, the hospital and UNC Charlotte and CMC University Hospital coordinated with us to actually pay for and build this PED Tower extension to benefit their customers and their employees. That was a nice win story for all parties involved. As you can see, we have our garage. This is a kind of a common brick vocabulary for our garages with this flashing. One of the interesting things here is that we put in active use spaces in the fronts of the garages of 50% of the frontage, so that we can get coffee shops and dry cleaners and those sort of things coming in with complementary uses that go along with a commuter type of a service. Is it still cracking badly?
I think it's a little bit better, but definitely better.
Great. So one thing right down the road from there, and you're looking at some aerial photography of UNC Charlotte. You can see Jerry Richardson Stadium, where the football stadium is. Because the LPA, and it's as currently defined, has a underpass coming from Sam Newell underneath 51 to go through the hospital campus. That's the way the current plan is. So what that means is that there is what we call a portal, which is basically it's not quite a tunnel, but it's a kind of it's the beginning of an underpass. So as the train comes up North Tryon Street, crosses Institute Circle, it automatically dives down and goes underneath the northbound North Tryon Street and pops out onto UNC Charlotte's campus. So the beginning point of the LPA that was adopted by the Metropolitan Transit Commission has this sort of treatment coming underneath 51 from Sam Newell onto the hospital's campus. So, it's not exactly the same, but looks something like that. It anticipates to look something like this. So now I'm kind of zooming back towards the 25th Street station. And the primary reason to do that is to kind of show some of our art treatments on the retaining walls that hold up the station. So this is 25th Street. It's a kind of an area near Villa Heights, near NODA. And we're on Brevard Street. There was a lot of low scale industrial uses here that is starting to turn over into different multifamily and mixed uses. But we really take a lot of pride in our walls and our structures. So we put decorative form liners on almost all of our walls that are visible to the public, as well as art and transit tiles. So we put these tiles in, and then we painted the handrails to match to give this cohesive look. And again, in this case, the station is kind of up on retaining walls, and we have some bicycle parking here, along with staircase and accessible ramps to get you from the lower elevation up to the platform. In this case, you can kind of see 25th Street. You can see this area is starting to redevelop over time. And then this road, 25th Street, is ultimately going to connect up into Villa Heights and to serve the community more directly. So I'm zooming down to South End again, and with a conventional catenary powered light rail system, and that has cab signaling, we're going to have boxes along the alignment. And what you're seeing here is a substation. Now, it doesn't look like a substation; it looks like a little house. So our substations are 40 feet long by 20 feet wide, and they're usually green. But in historic districts, we often treat them so that they match the surrounding community. So if you can believe, this is actually this thing right here. We made it match these units right here, which is a historic building near Atherton Lofts. If you see this color scheme with those eaves and these door stoops over here, they're pretty interesting. So we would anticipate any sort of substation that's within the historic district that we would do some sort of art treatment, not necessarily this, because this wouldn't match the context of Matthews, but something to more closely comply. We have usually one substation about every mile to meet our power needs for a system of our size. And this is a signal house. Signal house, it doesn't look that different from, it's a box, just like many of our other boxes. We have many signaling boxes, but this is kind of the brains of the signaling system. Anywhere we have a interlocking or a special track work, which means any place you can cross over from one track to another, you have to have a signal house, which includes all the relays and computer equipment that control the cab signaling system that makes the blue line work. And so we would have a similar type of a system for the Silver Line, and so we would also have, anticipate to have some sort of signal house system somewhere along the line. Anywhere we have a crossover or special track work, we have a signal house. And they can vary in size, and actually technology is changing so much when it comes to the signaling world. Something I know a little bit about that, we don't even know what signaling systems are going to be like and by the time the Silver Line's open. So they could be very small by then, or maybe not at all. So just something to keep in mind. But the point I'm trying to show is that there is going to be equipment associated with the Silver Line to make the system work, and we're going to treat that sensitively as we go through the project. So that's what I had for the Blue Line tour. Was there anything specific that anyone wanted to see, or any questions that you wanted to ask before we go to the rest of the program? Susan, you look like you're dying to ask.
Lou, I think I see your hand raised.
Yeah, technology changing. The power off the catenary.
I think you come off mute.
Say again? Am I not being heard?
I just reminded you. Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Oh, okay. The power for the catenary, off the catenary, apparently it's available in either 750 volts DC or 25,000 volts AC by option. Is there any decision been made on which type of power would be used on the Silver Line?
Well, we certainly, I'm not sure about 25,000 volts. That sounds like a third rail or a heavy type of a system. That's not the system we use. We use a 750 DC, as you say. So I guess the intent is that we would have one fleet of vehicles that could work both on the Blue Line and Blue Line extension. So the operating characteristics that we are operating under the Blue Line, we anticipate we would have a similar operating characteristic for the Silver Line, because we don't want to have two different fleets and two different maintenance facilities and two different operating characteristics. So the fleet for the Blue Line are Siemens S70 vehicles, and they run off 750 DC.
That good, Lou?
Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a little more.
What's
That's
that?
enough.
Okay, it looks like Chris Huff has a question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was just wondering, have you noticed any differences, positive or negative, with the at grade or above or below grade stations? I'm sorry, at grade, like at street level, like for example, this one I would assume is a little different than something that is the one on the south end, where it's a continuous grade.
So in general, I think we have some aerial stations. In general, I think they don't perform as well. I think people are less comfortable going to aerial stations, and people don't like walking up banks of stairs. I mean, this one is relatively minor. I mean, it's only going up one or two sets of stairs. It's not like a structure. We have a couple structures in the South Quarter, one at Tybola and one at Archdale, that are 50 or 60 feet in the air. People don't feel comfortable going up there. We can't really protect them from rain. And so we always strive for at-grade stations, because they better integrate into the community. Sometimes that's just not practical. And sometimes we have to have them elevated in some way. This is not a bad one as far as elevated. We have not had a underground station yet built, and we may have one for the Silver Line under some of the alternatives, especially closer to the Fourth Ward community. It's really unknown at this point, but our default position is going to be strive for at-grade stations always first, and then get pushed to aerial if we can't make track geometry work.
So I see a couple
Carrie,
of hands, Carrie and then Walter.
Thank you.
Go ahead,
Andy, just a couple of general questions. Can you help tell me the typical distance or size of a station, just so I can gauge scale in terms of number of feet or those types of things?
So
how many cars per station would we typically see in rush hour, et cetera?
Right. So our platforms for the Blue Line extension and what we would anticipate for the Silver Line would be about 286.5 feet long, just inside of that's the length of 3 Siemens S70 vehicles. We may give ourselves a little flexibility because we're not 100% locked into Siemens, but between 280 and 300 is what we'll probably shoot for. The platform width, if we do the side platforms, like we showed down at East West, those are 15 foot wide a piece. This platform is at 25th Street. It's a center platform. It's a little wider. So it's one platform that's 18 feet wide versus the side platforms are 2 at 15. Now, if we have special platforms where like we may have special capacity issues, like for Panther Stadium or for the connection to the Blue Line, or if we have an elevator coming up to the middle, that will be wider. Usually with an elevator, it's about 28 feet wide because we have to accommodate a vestibule on either side. So, I mean, we have a little bit of flexibility within our design criteria to go smaller, but we don't want to get into non-preferred situations because of county code requirements.
That was certainly helpful. The only other question I've got, I mean, all of this is above ground electrification. The poles, a distance between the poles and so forth, they're not the most attractive if you're trying to bring it through a downtown area. Mm-hmm. Are there any options other than artwork around the station columns that could address perhaps how those might appear 10 years from now?
Yeah, so we have 2 different types of catenary poles. we have, let's see, hopefully I can find it. We have painted poles, or it's painted green. And what we normally do is at our platforms, let me see if I can find a picture of one. At our platforms, we put in these green painted poles that the premise is that they look nicer than the galvanized poles. That's open to your interpretation, I suppose. There are situations I've seen in other systems where they've done different painting schemes on poles. It kind of gets into a little bit of a constructability and maintainability if you get too custom of a pole. Usually what we do is you see these ones are green, which matches the city of Charlotte's kind of, I forget the name of this. The city of Charlotte has a green theme. And through the city, they requested that we have our catenary poles within 100 feet of the station be this color of green. So we're definitely open to different paint schemes. I'll just say that those poles get banged around a lot in construction. And if they get too custom, it'll be hard for us to repair when they get dinged up. So we would probably be definitely open to treating them in a kind of a uniform way. But when it gets too custom, that would just be hard for us to maintain and keep nice.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Walter. I think you were up.
Yeah. So can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So just typically, how do you kind of determine where, is there some type of formula or something like that you guys kind of go by to determine where you would prefer to put stops and things like that, or make recommendations of where to place stops? I see kind of you guys kind of have something going as far as what type of stations, but that was kind of more so my question about even the location of them.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's kind of an art. It's not really a formula. And so really one of the things you look at is you really look at the land use pattern around it, either existing or proposed. That's probably the biggest thing, because it really doesn't make sense to have a station if no one can get to it or there's nothing around it. So we really want to be somewhere where people there is already a great destination. Downtown Matthews is a good example. We want the station to be somewhere where people want to go and want to be at, or that they will be at through some future development project. Usually where we look at is what is the land use pattern today and what is the land use plan for the future. And those are probably the two of the biggest drivers. Now there's some geometry requirements, and the platform has to be on straight track, and we can engineer that out. But really, it really comes down to where do people want to go, and where are people, and how can we best serve them and make sure they can access them.
Mm-hmm. And I also have an additional question. So, and I don't know if you're going to cover this later on or now, but if you are, I'm more than willing to just kind of chill out and wait. But I know that specifically UNCC. So at some point I was I supervised over at their transit system as well, and I seen the conjunction with our transit system with CATS and the light rail and such. So, do you guys have any collaboration with? With the transportation systems, or even the other maybe the transit aspect of CATS too, and some of the routes that are already routed through Matthews. Will you guys kind of take that in consideration too for people to kind of get back and forth, like if they live elsewhere, it's not directly on the Silver Line? Are there going to be bus routes, kind of routed to the Silver Line in case they live on outskirts, like let's say per se Mint Hill or something like that? There's a couple routes out there that I know of that may, be routed, or possibly be a good idea to maybe route them to Matthews to be able to take advantage of that Silver Line.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are part of CAT, so I want to make sure that's clear too, that whenever the bus service is also the light rail service. So I'm a CATS employee. So we are part of that. So as we get into it, as the routes as the alignment in the station kind of firms up, we're gonna take a hard look at the current bus system and also identify any new routes. We call them feeder routes. And so we'll spend a little time once we kind of understand where the stations are, and then we'll start looking at the community around it and figure out, okay, how can we either make adjustments to the current bus system? Because to be honest, it's operationally, it's very efficient for us to put people on light rail. It's a lot more efficient for us to shuttle people to light rail than it is for us to run buses downtown. So one of our first things we always try to do is try to figure out ways that we can take the current bus services, transfer them to light rail, which is much more operationally efficient.
Awesome.
And then I'll come up with new services. Then we'll come up with new services where we can't. And some of those are small or, short bus feeder systems that's going to neighborhoods and go maybe out to the sportsplex would be maybe a good example, or somewhere else that, where we can provide the best value to the community. So absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you.
I want to just ask for a little clarification. I think I just heard you say that conceptually speaking, you would rather run shuttles, which would be a smaller vehicle than a bus to get from an outlying area to a station. Did I hear that right?
It kind of depends on the ridership. So a lot of times we'll have like neighborhood shuttles that go through, and they might connect one bus route to another, or they might connect, one bus route to a light rail. So a good example is like the 12 to the 22. That's Tryon Street to Graham Street. So we'll run a shuttle service that goes back through all those neighborhoods and pick up people, and it just kind of loops in and picks people, moves people out. However, if we have a high ridership route, like if we know that we really think there's a lot of people coming from Mint Hill to the station in Matthews, for example. I don't know if that's true, but if we believe that, then we would put a larger route bus on. It kind of just depends on the ridership and how many people we got to carry. This just shows, this is the backside of J.D. Baker Clay. And so here's like all of our park and rides are going to have bus bays with covered seating, and benches and everything. And this is all part and parcel of the garage, and serves some of our routes. All that kind of operational planning kind of occurs after the stations are kind of firmed up, and we feel like we know exactly where the stations are and where the alignment is.
Looks like Lynn Lewis has her hand raised.
Oh, okay.
Hi, I was wondering, what's the total width when you include the rails and the rail trail?
What was the first part of the question, please?
What's the width
of the rail trail?
Along with the rail.
Oh, that's a good question. So, I don't know if the truth of the matter is we haven't designed the rail plus the rail trail yet. I'll say that in South End, where we have a rail and a trail on either side of the rail, that's about a 70-foot corridor. That includes room for planting strip, 2 sidewalks, and the rail in between. We haven't designed it, but that's a good rule of thumb.
And what is it just with the rail?
What the tracks, the ballast curbs or the outside of the track is going to be about 32 feet. And then, outside of that, there'll be, if there'll be some buffer between the outside of the ballast curbs or the fence, and then the rail trail will probably be wider. I know that to accommodate bicycle movements, that the better best practice is to kind of go for a little wider. I think 12 feet is the current practice. Susan probably knows better than I do. And so we would meet best practices if at all possible. So it would be 32 plus 12 plus 12 plus whatever buffer space is required. And so 50 some feet all in. But we probably need space for utilities and other things.
And then do you have any crosses planning that go over existing roads where the roads would have to stop and the cars would have to stop for the light rail?
Yeah, yes. Let's go back. So our crossings, so anywhere we have a crossing on North Tryon Street or anywhere on the system for that matter, we have what's called as preemption. So the light rail comes through, it triggers a track circuit, 500 or 600 feet away. This track circuit is up here close to Harris Boulevard Bridge. And so when it crosses the track circuit, it sets off a timer, and that timer then initiates a sequence where all the lights go to red, the gates come down, and the bells ring. So we control, the light rail comes in, doesn't have to stop for traffic, comes into the station. So that way we can get a reliable travel time. Those gates are usually down for about 30 to 45 seconds, depending on the situation. And so that's a pretty common treatment for us as we, to keep a reliable, fast service. Okay. Any other questions?
This is Bill. I'll chime in here. So some of the other things on our agenda had to do with process. In terms of the process of how you decide where a station goes, what type of station it is, what other attributes of the station, like is it something that you would allow for space for other retail? Tell us a little bit about the process of how those decisions are made, and I guess that's the general question.
Okay. Get back into if we're done with the Zoom, the Google Drive, to the PowerPoint. So, a lot of those decisions, you kind of have you have a station that you determine the best station for the community based on the land use and the vision that, the community, whether it's Matthews or Charlotte or wherever, feels like the best station is, and you get concurrence on that. Then you kind of have to figure out what kind of a station you have. So some stations all have consistent parts. But, you have to decide whether you have parking or not, whether you have bus bays or not, or bicycle parking. And a lot of that comes down to what's the goals of the community and what's the goals of, the cities. So like within the city, we have a lot of requirements as far as bicycle parking. And so bicycle parking is a code requirement, and we just do it, right? So vehicle parking is kind of a decision that you make based on the context of the street network and what we believe to be the best station to serve a park and ride customer. And then we kind of, design our system to include parking at those areas we feel like best serve a auto-oriented market. Now, whether there's, whether there's active use in the garages like we did at JB Clay, that was a zoning requirement. So zoning, when we zoned the garages, they required a 50% of the floor to be active use spaces. So we complied. So a lot of what we do when we go through those sort of decisions, what type of station, what type, is that we have a lot of experience. And so we look at case studies from other places, and we see what worked other places. And we know there's a lot of people who have a lot of experience on the Blue Line. So we know what's worked other places, and we know what hasn't worked. So I don't think there's like a math equation that tells us all this stuff. A lot of it just comes down to, feedback and experience to what we think serves the community the best. Okay. Any other questions?
So there's a lot of decisions. There's a lot of input that comes into play when you decide whether it's, one type of station or another, how it crosses the road. I guess one question to the task force members: has anybody not ridden the Blue Line? You could raise your, okay, David. So, Carrie, are you saying Lou? Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a.
But there are large numbers of Blue Line external videos of the line running on YouTube, many videos. So anybody who wants to ride it virtually, well, not ride it, but wants to view it externally, there are YouTube videos available.
Thanks for that, Lou. This is an awkward time to go and ride the Blue Line. But after seeing some of the attributes and some of the characteristics of the stations that were just pointed out, I'm motivated to go and give it a ride at some point. I don't know if this week would be the right time to do it, but at some point, and it's obviously up to each member how you're comfortable, whether you're comfortable doing that or not. But I thought that would be an interesting exercise for myself.
Bill, I think Carrie Lamson has a question.
Okay, Carrie.
Thank you. Andy, I'm just curious, from the planning and the decision-making and all of the effort that went in to place the stations on the Blue Line, how much did you get right and how much did you have to tweak? What stations shouldn't be where they are? What changes? How's the process of evaluating once construction is done to get the most utilization out of the line, and how close was the Blue Line to your expectations?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you. So I would say that, the Blue Line, the first Blue Line that we opened in 2007, I think there are some stations in the Blue Line which probably were not sited the best way. There was we were really under the gun at the time. I worked on that project. I was in charge of the stations, the design of them. So I know the pressure that we were under. So there was a lot of pressure to be done. Like some of the stations that I mentioned earlier, like the Tyvola station that's really high in the air, it really doesn't perform all that well. And I think people aren't comfortable with it. We didn't have a good engineering solution, so it stayed in the air. And also we did not build at one of the stations in South End that we're now actually going back and adding a station into South End, which is immensely complicated. Having worked, I've done 3 station retrofits, actually 4 station retrofits in my career, and they're very hard to build under construction or under operations. So there was one where we cut one that we're actually adding back. And the Blue Line, we also cut platforms from 3 platforms or 2 platforms, and now we have to go back and extend them to 3-car to match the BLE. And so I guess looking at the BLE, the Blue Line extension, I don't see too many things we got wrong, because I think we learned a lot, and we kept a lot of people around who came from the Blue Line, and we took a lot more time, and it was a lot more thoughtful with the way we located stations. So I say that from the inside looking out, I would say we got a lot better on the Blue Line extension than we were on the Blue Line, just because A, we were a lot less experienced, and B, we had a lot less time.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks, Andy. In the interest of time, let's move on in your presentation.
Thank you. I will. Well, my presentation hopefully doesn't take too long. I want to take a couple moments just to kind of show that we're very proud of our art in transit, and we spend a lot of time focusing on art because, to be honest, all the stuff we talked about, 90% what people care about when they ride our system, there's 3 things that they care most about. They care about how the ticket vending machines work, is it on time, and how do the stations look, right? That's what people talk about. And so we take a lot of pride in all 3 of those things. So this shows some of our form liners, decorative concrete form liners. These were very, very complicated. And as you can see, the bottom right one, that pattern, that is a specific pattern that we had to pay somebody to make sure that we met that exact pattern that was drawn up by the artist. And it was very complicated and hard to do. But we take walls very, very, the treatment of walls very seriously, because that's what a lot of people see. People don't want plain blank NCDOT cruciform MSE walls. And so we really want to try to create something that matches the community's expectations for treatment and visibility. just because these are the walls from the Blue Line extension, we will certainly have a different concept for the Silver Line as we proceed, and there'll be significant outreach to the community as we go forward. This shows an underpass. This is an NCDOT underpass near Uptown at 9th Street. That's actually near 12th Street, but we did a mural to really, and we added a lot of light and a lot of paint in a mural forms because we wanted people to feel comfortable walking under here. This was not a comfortable place for people to be a couple years ago, and so we added 15 feet of sidewalk, street lights, and murals, and right next to our 9th Street station because we really wanted people to be able to walk from Alpha Mill and some of the developments in North End to the 9th Street station. This shows a plaza, and is an artist. We hired an artist, a landscape artist, to come in to do a plaza near the Parkwood station. Those boulders were all handpicked from some quarry somewhere, and it's really based on this whole concept is based on geology. You can see the kind of the geographic topography maps baked into the windscreens of our canopies. So there's a whole theme of this station is geology, which is interesting. All right, I showed you this one. This is one of our walls near the 25th Street station with some inset tiles. So again, it's really important for our stations to look nice and inviting. This is a 36th Street station in Noda. So again, some pretty fancy form liners. And if you're interested, that top left picture is a curved cast in place wall with a 3-inch relief form liner. I think it might be the only one like this in the world. And we were very scared when we poured the concrete because we didn't know what to do with the cracked. So it worked out. And then we also had these very nice tile insets of this orchid.
I'm sorry, can you describe the top left again? I missed.
Oh, sorry. So the top left, see the wall on the top left? It's curved. So we had to create a curved cast in place form.
Gotcha. Okay.
The wall is about 15 to 16 feet tall, and it's got a 3-inch relief. And then when you put the form like that, you have to vibrate it and get it all set. So when you strip the forms, it could fail, or it could be, it could be great. And so if it failed, we didn't have time in the schedule to fix it. And so we would have been in real trouble if it would have failed or cracked. So thank goodness it hasn't.
While we're paused, it looks like Lou has his hand raised.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, on the underpass scenario, what is the height there? Obviously, you got to clear the catenary hanging wire.
Mm-hmm.
What would be, I guess, what's the pole height? That's probably a better judge. How tall are the poles?
Yeah, so our requirements for clearance under an underpass like this would be 24.5 feet. So as long as we have 24.5 feet, we're good. We can go to a lesser amount if need be, but it sometimes requires additional engineering analysis and safety evaluation. So our preferred would be 24.5. Luckily, this one wasn't even close. It was closer to 30 feet, and it was real easy for us to slap the poles underneath there.
And the other part of that question was, as you dive down to go underneath, what is the maximum grade? Well, I guess the maximum grade going up.
6%. 6% both ways.
Okay.
And that is max. So we don't want to be there unless we have to be. So we have criteria, but we definitely have to be mindful. The more we push criteria, both on curves and slopes, the higher the operating cost and the higher the construction cost. So there's a lot of sensitivity, especially to arson design and the operations about not pushing criteria. But sometimes you got to do it. Okay. So this is the Old Concord Road. So this shows the mallards, which were laser cut steel, along with cattails, which is done by some artist, a Mart project. It was part of the Blue Line extension. We also, there's a picture over here, which I can't see very well. Ducks, and then we have this leaf handrail. This leaf handrail, by the way, is one of my favorite things as far as Blue Line artwork goes. I just really like the way it looks, and green's my favorite color. This is Tom Hunter Station. So the interesting thing about Tom Hunter Station is that we actually hired an artist to work with the middle schoolers to come up with the art project. So middle school kids at Hidden Valley Elementary School came up with this concept, and then working with our artist, and then we then took that concept and ingrained it into our windscreens and our canopies. So we really take a lot of sensitivity to trying to work with the community, to try to reflect the community as much as possible. This is just an elevator tower. It's got some very decorative, fancy art pieces ingrained into the glass. This is a canopy of JW clay with more art. It's a kind of word treatment here and there. As you can see, we do a lot of glass work, and glass is one of those things that we're always putting in glass, and we're always trying to make it as pretty as possible. And then we inlaid some steel in a form of a map, kind of a topographic map in the ground on the platform. Here's these bike racks were also an art project. We had an artist from New York come up with a concept to create bicycle racks, and then we had custom bike canopies installed with this custom insert to kind of match. So we did this up and down. So with these aren't set for the Silver Line yet, we'll do another solicitation for what those bicycle parking should be. All right, so that was the pretty stuff. Does anybody have any sort of questions before I get into kind of Silver Line stuff?
I don't see anyone's hand raised right now.
Okay.
Natasha.
Yeah, thank you. Is there any sort of like LEED or CITES certification you guys can reach out for? Or is that something that you guys did for the Blue Line, or something that's possible for Silver Line?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a very timely question, because we're just talking about that now. We did not seek any certifications for the Blue Line, primarily because LEED really doesn't react well to horizontal projects, right? LEED is better for enclosed spaces where you have a lot of air-conditioned spaces. We evaluated it. We tried to figure out a way to make it work. Most of our facilities are not air-conditioned. We have a lot of yard spaces, a lot of shop spaces. We have very few actually conditioned office spaces on the project. So when we looked at it, the opportunities for us to really do a LEED was very little. So we understand now that there is more of a horizontal certification, sustainability certification. I was just in a meeting about it yesterday. Really must have hit me because I can't remember what it's called, but there is more of a certification for horizontal projects that we're going to evaluate. We're looking at a couple different strategies. There's also there's project-oriented LEED now, and so you can get it's kind of more holistic and less like based on how much air can you handle or how many water quality features can you build. It's more holistic. That might be something that's more attainable for us, because our project is so big and so diverse. You can imagine it's 26 miles of steel and concrete, and it doesn't quite lend itself to the traditional LEED. But so we're in the process of doing a certification evaluation. Our contractor WSP is going to provide us a report to give us what options we have given the certification options that are out there.
Yeah, one that I just recently learned about through work was one called CITES, and it's more for land development projects and things like that. I work at an architecture firm, and so our land development group was just reviewing some projects for us that I don't know if it would work or not, but something that I've just recently learned about, and I think it's a relatively new program.
Interesting. Well, I know. Well, I'll be interested to look into that.
Yeah.
The city of Charlotte has also a CAP. It's a sustainability environmental action plan, and so we're also looking at that. That will dictate, electric parking, charging spaces, and there's a lot of kind of goals and aspirations in that. So really kind of need to go. We're going to go through that to figure out how that applies to the Silver Line, because it's not overly specific, but we kind of have to figure out how we're going to comply and interpret it. So great question, great timing, because we're right in the middle of it.
Andy and team, we had allocated 60 minutes for Andy's presentation. I don't want to cut it short if we're getting into some interesting discussions, interesting topics, but I just want to be aware of the timeline.
Yep. I can go through some of the rest of this stuff pretty quick.
Well, no need to rush. I just want to make everybody aware of the time allocation.
Okay.
Bill, do you want to take Carrie's question before Andy moves on?
Yes, please. Thank you. Go ahead, Carrie.
Thank you, Susan. Just very quickly, Andy, what's the policy on the Blue Line regarding commercialization, ads, promotions? Do you have any advertorials and business commercialization that tries to work within these environments? You don't see much of it firsthand. Do you also have policies to prohibit it? I mean, it's how do you deal with that that aspect of things?
Yeah, so that our first CEO, Ron Tober, he was completely against advertising both on the train, like wrapping the train, and on the platforms. So when we first started back in, that was not even on the table. He left and times got tight. So we started to add on to our fencing. So this fencing right here, as you can see, if you go to any one of our platforms, there is frames for advertising panels on these fencing now. So there is a policy to allow advertisers to insert. I'm not the advertising guy, so I don't exactly know how it works, but I built the fence. So I know that we put in panels based on the policy, the advertising policy, and they do wraps around the light rails, whether we like it or not.
Well, and that just leads to the question that would say, should you end up going through the middle of a historic downtown community, would the community have any say on prohibiting that for certain stretches of the rail track, for example?
I don't know how that would work with the vehicles. That would maybe a broader conversation with our marketing and chief operating officer. But regarding the platforms, maybe. I think it might be hard. I mean, most of our advertising is interior, so I don't think it can be seen. At least in Charlotte, per code, it can't be seen or visible outside of the platform. So we have to demonstrate that you really can't see it very well. So maybe there's a way that we can get there through a zoning regulation.
All right, I appreciate that. I spent 14 years in San Francisco writing BART. So again, just a general concern as things would develop, that if it's a popular vehicle and it's used, that there's going to be a strong interest in using it as a marketing platform. And there's just certain things that I was curious whether or not there'd been any policy or practice set. Thank you.
Thank you. Good question.
Carrie, I love the point. I love the question. Let's not take that concept off the table of our feedback to the town board. Of what to do with advertising, what to do with marketing. Thank you.
Okay. If no other questions, I'll move on with the program. All right, how we got here. All right, so now we're talking about the Silver Line. So most people probably on the call have an understanding of the Silver Line, the history of the Silver Line, but really the Silver Line used to be the Southeast Corridor and the West Corridor. So they were two separate and distinct kind of studies way back when in 2006, when we did our first 2025 Transit System Corridor Plan and 2030 Corridor Plan. So they were two separate projects. The Silver Line at the Southeast Corridor at the time was the bus rapid transit, serving from uptown along the busway to the town of Matthews, and that the West Corridor was a streetcar, basically just going to the airport. That's the way it was for several years. The town of Matthews never really supported bus rapid transit in that, and requested that we evaluate light rail moving forward. During that time, while that back and forth was going on, we opened the Blue Line, so we kind of proved the point that, hey, light rail works in Charlotte. Everyone likes it. And it's something that people wanted to we proved the concept. We opened the Sprinter service which is kind of an enhanced bus service to the airport, building a market there so that people can ride to the airport. We opened the phase 1 of the LYNX Gold Line. All that kind of led to a 2016 adoption of the Southeast Corridor as light rail. So that was done in 2016, changed the alignment and changed the mode of transit from bus rapid transit to light rail. So there's a lot of coordination between our planning staff, and which I wasn't part of. I was in the construction at that point, and the town of Matthews to identify the LPA, or locally preferred alternative. I'm going to say the word LPA a lot, which just means locally preferred alternative. So that happened. And then we opened the Blue Line extension in 2018. That was a very significant extension, doubled the light rail system, and really with our upgraded features and upgraded operating characteristics, really kind of cemented things. Next big change was in 2019. We then changed the West Corridor to the Silver Line, turned it from streetcar to light rail, and then combined it with the Southeast Corridor, creating one mega project of the Silver Line, which really goes from Matthews, CPCC, Levine, to the town of Belmont. As part of that, there was also a recommendation to further study that into Stallings and Indian Trail, extended from Matthews to Stallings Indian Trail, and that is part of our current study. So after we got that, the Metropolitan Transit Commission, our governing board, directed us to proceed in that way. We then started procurement to hire an environmental and design firm to lead the way. That's WSP. We executed a contract with them in 2020, just 5 months ago. And that's kind of how we got there. We're also on the same path looking at alignments to go up to, not with light rail, but with bus rapid transit up to the lake, and then an extension of the light rail over through Pineville to Ballantyne. And those efforts are ongoing right now, along with extensions of the Gold Line. So this just kind of shows some of our guiding principles. These guiding principles were really from the initial system update back in 2016. Really nothing has changed because we feel like these are good, solid principles. Establish reliable transit to connect the region, enhance quality of life, and strengthen access to opportunities. Use transit to influence and shape growth while respecting community character. Increase mobility in each corridor through effective transit investment. So just to kind of get into the Silver Line a little bit, the Silver Line is really made of 3 parts right now. There are three I'd say legs of a stool you could think about, or 3 parts of the project. There's the design environmental services. That's the light rail, the concrete, all the grading, everything that makes the light rail work, along with the civil improvements in the stations. And that's managed by me. And that goes the whole way from Belmont to Matthews, and then also potentially on to Stallings Indian Trail. There's the TOD planning, and that is more of the land use secondary benefits of light rail, looking at development patterns and scenarios around the stations, and vision, and what do we want the places around the stations to be and look like. And that's a separate contract. Those are complementary projects that we feed off each other. The design environmental services takes a lot of cues, especially at this early stage, about identifying where stations alignments go to ensure that we pick the best alternatives which best meet the needs of the community and best reflect the scenarios identified through the TOD study. And then, of course, there's the rail trail study, which seeks to identify a rail trail scenario or vision that goes the entire length of the project. Some of that most of that will hopefully be directly adjacent to the Silver Line, so we can implement it with the Silver Line. It's it's very cost effective to just build it while we're building the Silver Line. Some of it may not be for whatever reason. So in that case, we'll look for implementation schemes to basically pull that off over time. But the goal is really to start this program with rail trail at the heart of it because it's so successful on the Blue Line. So now that we're advancing the Silver Line, really the first phase of this part of the project is really 3 parts. There's stakeholder engagement, public involvement, and alignment refinement. So the stakeholder engagement, that's really meeting with all the institutions and towns and departments along the 26 miles to really understand their vision for what the Silver Line can bring to their communities or groups. And, in some cases, they may not see it as a good thing, and some may see it as a great thing. And so we really wanted to spend the first part of this really getting our heads around what do people want and what do people see the Silver Line can bring to them. And so this just shows kind of all the folks that we've been meeting with, including the City of Belmont, Town of Matthews, Stallings, Indian Trail, Belmont. I'm not going to read everyone down the list, but we've met with almost anyone who would take a meeting with us to ensure that we have heard everyone and that people have the right voice who lead these big institutions. That rolls into also a very, very important component, which is public involvement. So the first round of public involvement was truncated by the coronavirus, unfortunately. So we're only able to have 2 public meetings. One, thankfully, was in the town of Matthews, and one was in Uptown Charlotte. Unfortunately, we had to cancel the other 5, but we were able to do a number of online presentations and focused virtual community meetings to kind of make up for that. And so we also did an online survey, and some of the big things that people were top reasons to use the Silver Line. Most things people were really excited about was connecting to the airport and special events and connecting to the Blue Line. So access and mobility were big reasons why people like the Silver Line. This just kind of shows, the picture from the town of Matthews Town Hall, very well attended, very enthusiastic. Hopefully some of y'all were there. It was great. It's great to go to a public meeting where people are happy to hear what you're saying. And we got a lot of good feedback and input from people as they, writing little stickies and notes on the maps. And as we through that first phase, we will have a second phase that is the round 2 of the public meetings is intended to be in September of this year. It's going to be unique for us because it will likely be 100% virtual, which is kind of a new one on us. And it'll be the first one where we're showing new alignments or new alternatives other than the locally preferred alternative. So it's kind of a technical challenge for us to figure out how we present all this very complicated information to the public and how we receive their feedback virtually. And so we're working off details for how to do that. So the third part of it is really refining the alignment. When I say refine the alignment, it really means that we're looking at the locally preferred alternative that was identified by the MTC and adopted by the MTC, and then identifying any sort of risks and uncertainties with that alignment. And if there are risks and uncertainties or missed opportunities that weren't known about in 2016, then we're going to evaluate an alignment option, which may take advantage of that opportunity or may avoid a risk or uncertainty. Because one of the key things, one of the takeaways for today is this project is really not a planning project. This project is an implementation project at this point. So our mindset is not to plan new alignments or new concepts. Our mindset is to mitigate risk and move forward with a project that we feel like can compete for federal funding and achieves the visions of the community, and that it will be not less encumbered by third-party issues. So we don't want to tie ourselves to too many other projects that could, cause the project to be delayed. So just that's kind of like a mindset that we are in thinking of, like we're thinking about constructability, and we're thinking about operations, and we're thinking about risk. So it's just kind of it's a different mindset than a normal kind of a planning project. But anyway, so why are we refining the Silver Line? So one of the things I kind of mentioned is that really no one's looked at from CATS the alignment since 2016 in the Southeast Corridor. So things have changed. The hospital has built buildings that are very close or in the way of the LPA that are of concern. There's other buildings along the 26 miles that are in conflict with the locally preferred alternative. So we have to evaluate that to determine if we should buy the building or we should move the alignment to mitigate that risk. We're getting into a much deeper level of engineering evaluation than was done before. Before it was more of like a feasibility study. Can we make this work? Now we're really getting into details of catenary systems and signaling systems. How can we actually do this? And what special engineering evaluation is required for us to figure that out? Because we also seek to compete for federal funds, it has to go through a very strict environmental process. It's called an environmental impact statement. And you may have heard those before, but it's a very complicated process where you identify the good, the bad, and the ugly of the environmental impacts of the project. Some things are good, some things are not so good. And if they're not so good, you have to seek to mitigate them. So that's a very important thing for us to look at now. And one big thing that we're very passionate about is lessons learned from the Blue Line. So I worked on the Blue Line for 20 years. I know a lot about what we did well, and I know a lot about some things that we can do better. And that gets down into the weeds on some things. But we really want to spend some time and document all those things that we've done well and some things that we need room for improvement on, so that we can design the Silver Line so it best operates and most constructible. And there is a ton of development projects along this 26 miles. There's developers up and down. There's always, once a week, I'm getting a call from somebody who wants to build something in the way of the Silver Line, and we have to, figure out a way to work with developers all up and down the alignment. And we come up with different strategies for how to do that. We really need to come up with ways to coordinate with developers to ensure that their projects can proceed and they're not being held up by the Silver Line, and that we can, excuse me, and that we have an envelope provided for us so that we don't have to then, relocate people. We don't want to do that, or impact future developments. We don't want to do that. So it really gives us an opportunity to coordinate with both developers and big projects like NCDOTs. So just kind of giving you a kind of a timeline for kind of what we've been up to. So we kicked off the program in January, had a big workshop. We had all the folks from the towns and all the institutions. Jay and Susan and Dana were there. They did a presentation on the town, Matthews, and what we and CATS need to know or be thinking about with the town as it relates to that. We have then initiated the stakeholder engagement process, where we had these ongoing interviews with people. We educated them, they educated us. It was very productive. We had our first alignment refinement workshop where we looked at the LPA and figured out, okay, well, we might need to rethink this, or we might need to rethink that based on some risks and uncertainties. And there we came up with the list of options that are kind of under consideration that we're evaluating. At the same time, we also came up with some decision-making principles and a framework, because we have so many decisions to make in such a short amount of time that we really needed a framework for how to make those decisions. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. We had our first round of public meetings. That was unfortunately truncated, but still fairly successful. The second big workshop they had was the urban design workshop. And really what that did is that took those design options that we identified at the first workshop, all those things, and we compared them to the LPA as it relates to development. And that looks at development scenarios. How ripe are the areas to develop? Is it realistic that they're going to develop, or are they not realistic they're going to develop? And came up with some scenarios so that we can kind of use that as a comparison against the LPA. So now I'm going to show kind of some of the concepts that we have right now. And these are being reviewed actually this week. We spent all week with our oversight team reviewing some concepts and the alignment options that are on the table. What you see right here is, and I'll give you a little bit of orientation. This is Monroe Road, this green. Can you guys see my cursor, my arrow? Okay. So the locally preferred alternative had the light rail coming up Monroe Road in some way, and then branching off Monroe Road, and then going up to Sam Newell across CSX, and then into Sam Newell across 51. I'll show that. I'll show the rest of that later. As part of our evaluation, we kind of looked at, well, maybe CSX alignment made sense in this section, because we're not going to mess up traffic. We're gonna be able to go a little faster. So we kind of evaluated that as a comparison to the locally preferred alternative in Monroe Road. We also identified this kind of variation, which went through the Family Dollar site as kind of a concept maybe to incent a development. We kind of, in our current evaluation, working with the town staff, we kind of decided that we set this one aside because we thought it was too speculative at this point. But all these kind of concepts are also under review by our steering team next week. So these are not final decisions. The next group is downtown Matthews. And so we had a number of lines here that we evaluated. Again, the locally preferred alternative, follow my cursor, comes in here, crosses over the CSX tracks, and then comes down Sam Knoll and through Matthews. Presbyterian, well, it used to be Presbyterian, now it's Novant. So we know that the hospital registered some concerns about the locally preferred alternative for several reasons. Primarily is that impacted some of their buildings and their footprint. So because of that concern, we looked at some other options because we really know that the town's vision is to get to the Sportsplex and the ENT. So so if we can't get through here because we can't work it out with Novant, how can we get there? Well, in review of the town's mobility plan, they recommended that we evaluate a Matthews Street alternative, which looks something like this and comes off Matthews Street, crosses Trade, and then follows Matthews Minhill Road out to ENT and onto the Sportsplex. We also looked at the CSX options, paralleling CSX, but we kind of felt like the environmental impacts of going through the downtown parallel to the CSX were too great. And we thought it would be too disruptive to the community. So our recommendation to our steering team is going to be to remove those options from consideration. So, but one thing to note also is that we have had some very productive meetings with Novant recently. And so it sounds like we might have an alternative that they would support. We haven't reached 100% agreement with them yet, but we kind of have a concept for how we might be able to get through there and get their support and approval. And then out at the ENT and the Sportsplex, again, the LPA comes here through Novant and then enters into Matthews Minhill Road. The LPA was assumed to be in some way, either in the middle or on the side of Independence Point Parkway, an NCDOT project. There's been a lot of coordination. There's a lot of concern about that because that NCDOT project seems to be going in a different direction and not really 100% accommodating the Silver Line. So we spent a lot of the spring working with the NCDOT and the town and the developer of the ENT to kind of come up with some concepts which goes along parallel to Independence Point Parkway. However, we do have a couple options here that we're proposing to take off the table, and those are the ones that kind of go through and bisect the Sportsplex because the Park and Rec has some concerns about those alignments. Also, the CSX options also similarly we propose to remove from consideration. So in the end, the locally preferred alternative or the variation of locally preferred alternative will somehow come through here, and we're still working with the town, the state, and the developer for the exact configuration for the alignment in Independence Point Parkway as we proceed. Ultimately, then it comes over here, crosses over I-485 with a station over here at CPCC Levine. And then we're evaluating concepts where we go over through Matthews and Stallings and Indian Trail. And we have a meeting with them on Monday to review some concepts. All those would kind of tie into this terminus right here.
Hey, Andy?
Yes.
What are the orange outline properties on the maps?
Which one are they? Like this one?
Yes.
Yeah. So those are historic properties.
So do not touch.
Do not touch unless you have feasible, reasonable alternatives.
Okay. So
as you see, we're getting into those, and we have feasible, reasonable alternatives. So we are going to tread lightly.
Is that one underneath the white arrow, like next to the CSX options? Is that a historic property or just a up and to the left just a little bit?
That one.
No, up to the right now.
Oh, okay.
Yep, right there. Is that a historic property, or is that just kind of the coloration of the?
I don't think that's historic. I don't know that one. Y'all might know better than me.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we've identified that one yet. So if you know that it is, please let us know. Okay. So I'll pause there because that's a lot. That's a whole lot of information. Was there any thoughts or any thoughts on that before I proceed into where we are now and what's next? And by the way, just kind of what you're seeing on those lines is kind of not, that is what we intend to, assuming we get a concurrence from our steering team, that's what we would take to a public meeting in September. So those alignments that we are carrying forward. And then we'll receive public input on those. And, the public may, have different opinions, and that would influence some of our decision making down the road. Okay. So where we are now is we're going through the scorecard process, and we're evaluating each one of those. And I'll talk a little bit more about scorecard in a minute. Because of how big this project is and how complex it is, we've kind of come up with the decision making and the way we talk about this as a scorecard. We're in the middle of the alignment refinement workshop 2, in which we're shortlisting. I kind of gave y'all this sneak preview of what those shortlists will be, and that will go to our steering team next week for those shortlist alternatives. And then we'll spend the better part of July and August doing outreach, local official outreach and stakeholder outreach, so that people understand what's going to be on the public meetings in September. Alignments are going to be in the meetings in September.
Hey, Andy, I just want to remind you and everyone that it's already 8:32, so just being respectful of everyone's time.
Okay. I'll dance to your music. If I can keep going, but be quick, or I can stop.
That's up to Bill, but I just wanted to do a time check.
Thank you, Dana. Let's keep rolling.
Okay. I'm almost done. I only got a couple more slides. Okay. So, we have in September, we'll have our virtual public meetings. That's also the beginning of early scoping. That's a very important part of the FTA process. So that's whenever the project starts to get real in their mind, when you start to enter into early scoping through the environmental process. So this is when the public meetings count, but the input is very valuable, and there's a lot of requirements for how we conduct the meetings. That's why having it virtually is kind of fraught, because we're kind of treading on new ground a little bit. So after we get some public input and some feedback, then we'll keep layering in engineering information and survey information, and environmental information to kind of lead us to a public meeting round 3 in the November or December timeframe. And there we would then be proposing the alignment in which we would then take to the Metropolitan Transit Commission as the new LPA, assuming we have a new one. This is in this time frame. This would also be where we would want to request the Town of Matthews resolution of the alignment that we take to the MTC. So we would expect, some sign of concurrence and agreement from the town, so that when we go to the Metropolitan Transit Commission, we can demonstrate that we're all on the same page with the alignment that we're taking. And so then that alignment would be in the February, or that adoption would be in the February or March timeframe. And so that's when we would have that adoption, and then we would begin some more of the harder edge engineering and design work that really progresses the concept that we're putting together right now. We'll then be really designing it and really pushing forward for a 15% engineering set. So any questions about that timeline before I go to the next one?
I just want to offer this insight to the committee. That November Town of Matthews resolution of alignments, that's what we are aiming for, is to provide a recommendation to the town board of what that alignment should be. Today's meeting is primarily an education meeting. Obviously, it's not a meeting where we're making any decisions, but just keep that in mind about the timeline.
Thank you very much.
Bill, Kerry had his hand up while Andy was talking. It's down now. Kerry, did you have a question?
Thank you, Susan. Just going back for a second, Andy, I just wanted to make sure I understood or didn't mishear. When you were discussing some of the alternative paths down through town that you mentioned as you were reviewing this, did you say something about the quarry property and that it was too speculative to be considered for any part of the path, or did I misunderstand that? What's the area to the left?
Yeah, we are not evaluating the quarry alignment at this point. That was evaluated under a previous study. 2016 system plan looked at that and kind of set it aside. So that's not part of the current evaluation.
So so obviously it was considered and there was some discussion.
Yes.
All right. Well, sure. Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Okay. There we go. So on decision making, so we initiated a process, and you'd think this would be easy when you look at how simple this exhibit is, but getting to agreement by all the parties, all the stakeholders to this concept was a kind of a labor. So there's a lot of input on what this ended up being. And behind this, there's a lot of kind of data behind each one of these benefits. So when we're comparing, the way to think about this is we're comparing a new alternative versus the locally preferred alternative. And that's the key, because all these other alignments are speculative, and the only alignment we have adopted is the locally preferred alternative. So when we compare one alignment versus locally preferred alternative, this is the framework in which we compare it against. So does it have more benefits than risks? Or is there one risk that is so great that it makes the new alignment not feasible or not doable? Or maybe it makes the locally preferred alternative not feasible or doable, given the benefits or risks. So the way that we've looked at this is that the three things we've looked at is competitive and reliable travel time. That's one of the most important things for our customers is you can get on the train, you can get somewhere when you need it to be, and it's fast. We promote equitable TOD, and really what that's about is the secondary benefits of light rail development around stations, and be able to craft and form that development in such a way that meets the goals of the town or the community in which it's in. And then access to destinations and local connectivity. We really want to make sure that our customers can get home and get to school or get to a job or get to shopping. So what sort of, or special events is a big one for us, Panthers games, Bobcats games, or it's not Bobcats anymore, but special event programs, and that's very important for us. So improving that access is very important. And all that's balanced against risks, because now we are in an implementation mode and we are looking to push forward a project that we can build and operate and maintain. And so that we want to make sure we're cautious with dependencies on other projects and third parties. CSX is a good example of a third party that we're cautious of. Capital and operating costs. We always have to be mindful of how much money we're spending and how much it takes to run the system. And of course, environmental screening, because we are following that federal process. So for simplicity's sake, and because one of the challenges that we have on this project is it's so big and it's so complicated, explaining some of these decisions to decision makers and to the public is very hard unless you're in this as deep as we are. So we've kind of come up with a concept of each decision is like telling a story, and the way we're telling that story is with the scorecard. So this is just a fabricated concept of the locally preferred alternative versus a design option A or B. And so we've kind of said, well, the LPA is better in reliable travel time and access, but not so good on dependencies. But we acknowledge in that yellow box that sometimes there's a key driving variable, that you can have all the benefits in the world of an alignment, but if it requires a third party or somebody else to do something and you can't control that, then it's a major risk, and you may not be able to proceed with that alignment because of that key driving variable. Anyways, so that was just kind of a concept, a way that we can describe this to boards, elected officials, and the community, because there's going to be a lot of questions about all the decisions that have to be made. And all that's backed up with data and metrics behind it. So it's not just a dumb scorecard, but there's a ton of data behind that which backs it up. So we're challenged. So that is a ton of information, and I thank everyone for their patience as I go through that. But I thought it would be good to really give you a real holistic view of where we are on the Silver Line, to give this group and this body a good stepping off point in your noble efforts. So I don't have anything else, and so I leave that to the chair.
Thank you very much. Any parting questions from the task force?
Looks like Chris Huff has a question.
Chris.
Yeah, I was just wondering how refined the LPA is, and if we could see that alignment. I think that the copy that I've seen at least is fairly high level.
Yeah, let's go back. We can go back and take a look at it. The LPA. There we go.
Is that accessible somewhere? Or is this deck somewhere posted somewhere? Because I can go find it. I just didn't know if we had access to it at this point.
No, this is in progress. These are in progress drawings.
Okay.
So the only, I think the only public map is the purple map. And so we would present this to the public meeting in September after we gain concurrence from the steering.
Okay, so if our task is to evaluate other alignments against the LPA, is that something that we would wait until September to do that evaluation, or should we expect this level of detail or higher before that?
Well, we could provide a concept like this to review of the alignments that we're proposing to take to the public meeting. And so then you would have the benefit of that, and we would certainly be able to give you another presentation of those more in detail of these concepts after they're adopted by the steering team. I didn't want to get too ahead of the steering team before we, started showing new lines, but I feel pretty good about the recommendations we're making. So I think after we get approval from the steering team, we can send out a little more detailed drawing of the concepts in which we intend to take to the public meeting. And then you'll have then we'll be able to have the benefit of a presentation of that. And then when we go through the public process, then your input would be, could be collected at the same time as the public process.
Dana, is that in line with what we discussed earlier today?
So if I'm hearing Andy correctly, and per Andy and I's discussion yesterday, I believe on the August 5th meeting, that is going to be the meeting where they'll dive in, they being Katz and Andy and Jenna, dive in to more detail on these alignments. Is that right, Andy?
Yeah, we can do that.
So August 5th, they want to go to the steering committee first, their steering committee, before they release any of these drawings. And then on August 5th, we'll get to have a deep dive look at it so that we can get ahead of the public meetings that will come in September.
Thank you, Dana.
I think Lynn Lewis had her hand raised for a minute. Lynn, do you still have a question?
I was going to ask if we could get a copy of this, but you don't want to release this yet, if I was hearing correctly.
I would prefer not to until we get concurrence. I don't want to get ahead of our governing body. I feel like I've got pretty good buy-in on these concepts, but I'd prefer to wait till next Friday, and then assuming we get concurrence, then I'm happy to release this after that.
Scott Phillips has a hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. Andy, I'm looking at the slide you have up here, and this is helpful. I agree with the earlier comment. It would be more helpful to have something essentially at a lower elevation. But in all of these concepts, notwithstanding the line going through Matthew, which I think everyone on this committee would agree that should happen, and we're excited about that. The route itself, I'm not sure how much it's taking into account future development as it is really trying to touch points that are here today. And I don't know if you can comment on the path, or maybe it's a takeaway for you, but Matthews continues to grow. And some of these corridors really don't lend themselves to future growth. They're kind of what it is today. And maybe that's what we did with Cat's Blue Line, but I know Cat's Blue Line generated a ton of development, both north and south, that enhanced the local communities, which clearly is one of the main goals of this effort. So as I'm looking at these routes, I know for myself, I'm looking at places where we can find new development and bring densities the way Matthews is really planning to do in the future. So I'd like to see that in some of these route considerations.
Okay. Well, I maybe we have a little more conversation about that, because I'm not exactly aware of what exactly we're talking about.
Okay. We'll talk more as a committee about that and maybe get something back to you sooner.
Okay.
Jim Johnson has a hand raised.
Yeah, just real quick. I mean, how big a risk factor is CSX? Is that even something we should be thinking about?
They're a risk. I mean, I've relocated 2 different railroads, and I know what it takes to do that. It's a challenge. I mean, I think there's 3. We're gonna have a relationship with CSX. We're gonna bridge over them. We're either gonna bridge over them, which is there's 3 types of agreements that we're gonna be into. We're gonna be into a bridge agreement, so we're gonna bridge over them. That's done. That's happened 3 times. Or we're gonna have a real estate agreement. We're gonna share a corridor. Or we're going to relocate their tracks. We don't, in no case do we want to relocate their tracks. That's terribly painful. I've done it. I don't recommend it. Occupying their corridor is not hard. In fact, it has a benefit, an operational benefit, but they certainly control a lot of your upfront schedule, but they can be compelled by money. So in my experience, I've had some conversations with CSX. If you can find the right dollar sign, they might be willing to comply. Just like a lot of other businesses, the railroads are, looking to make money. So they may be open to it. I think the bigger question is, are we open to it? Are we open to playing that game with them? And does that meet what the town wants and what, as far as the vision for this, this alignment?
They're kind of that uncontrollable third party, though, that you don't want to deal with.
They are. I agree. But we are. That's the problem, is no matter what, they could hold us up. So you could look at this as like you might be in for a penny and for a pound. If we're going to have a real estate agreement with them further back outside of Matthews. So that's one philosophy is, well, if they're going to have their hooks into you, you might as well get your best alignment out of it. But another question is whether you want light rail to be back in the railroad tracks, and can you get there, and what kind of development does that create? That's a whole nother conversation. I think that is a great question for this committee to wrestle with, is the CSX and the Monroe alignment. I don't know that we're willing to get into an agreement with CSX at all, more than we already have to. But I think there's trade-offs on the CSX alignment with regard to operations and cost.
And Jennifer Saunders, did I see your hand raised briefly? Did you have a question? No. Okay. All right. Those are all the hands that I see, Bill.
Thank you so much, Susan. So back to the agenda. Dana, could I impose on you to bring up the agenda one more time? We'll just talk about the last couple of things.
Sure. Andy, can you give me control, please?
You have it.
Awesome.
By the way, Andy, that was fantastic. I really appreciate your time and your knowledge of the Blue Line and what's going on with the Silver Line. I'm sure we'll be hearing from you some more.
I apologize for going long, but when it comes to the Blue Line and the Silver Line, I have a lot to say. So,
well, likewise, I guess I'll say thanks to the task force members. We went way over time today, and appreciate your patience and attention. Just by virtue of the questions. We had some real food for thought, and we heard about some environmental impacts, whether or not we can have some certifications. Like I think it was Lynn or Natasha. Natasha, you mentioned the architectural input to the environmental certifications, right?
Yes.
And then we had some input to consider future development versus areas of town that might not be suitable for future development. They kind of are what they are, and how does that look like in light of the train coming through? The CSX component. Thanks, Jim, for that food for thought. And Walter, you mentioned about bus versus how do we get people that are away from the Silver Line to the Silver Line? So all of that stuff, I think, is going to really come in handy with how do we approach our recommendations to the board. Keep those questions and those thoughts coming. It's enlightening to me as primarily, to be honest with you, I'm primarily a spectator trying to form an opinion on all of this. We're going to transform those comments and those spectator opinions into something that we could recommend as a committee, as a task force to the board. So thank you. Where are we now? Okay, so meetings coming up. So let's look at the end and work back. So November 9th is when we want to have something to the Board of Commissioners.
Potentially. We could always, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So November 9th, the other meeting in November is the week of Thanksgiving. So I don't know if the commission is going to have that meeting. So that's why I thought November 9th would be a better fit. I still have to talk to town clerk and Hazen to make sure that is the proper target. But after our discussion this morning, Bill, that's what I sort of, I think that's the best fit for right now.
Okay. Thank you. So the end date is a little bit fluid, but I think that's a good target. November 4th would be so let's talk about what was communicated to us versus what is up on the screen right now. When I was approached to contribute to this task force, there was on the schedule 5 meetings, and now there are more than 5 meetings. So I just want to make sure that we're all aware we are meeting twice monthly through the summer here. August 19th will be our last of the 5 meetings, but then there are 3 additional ones, September 2nd, October 7th, and November 4th, that we're asking us to also contribute to. And those will be more where we get into the nitty-gritty. How do we format a decision to hand off to the Board of Commissioners? A recommendation, I guess, is probably what I would call it at this point. So we're asking everybody to hang on until that last meeting. We're proposing monthly meetings, September, October, November, as opposed to biweekly meetings. Now, those can change as well. We might try to add one if we are desperately in need of another meeting. So I hope everybody is enthusiastic and able to contribute in all of these meetings, and for all reality, just as much as you possibly can. Understand, I'm not sure I'm going to make that August 19th meeting, to be honest with you. So understandable.
I can send this out to everyone. I will send this out to everyone so everyone has these dates in their email.
Thank you. Thank you. Any comments, questions about this way forward? Okay. I'm not seeing any hands up. Susan? I lost my screen that showed the hands up.
I saw someone do a thumbs up, so I'll take that as speaking for everyone.
Thank you, David. So one last comment. Today, last week, or last meeting, today, And the next two are really intended to be informational. They're not so much in terms of making decisions or discussing alternatives or discussing what we ultimately want to get down to discussing. They're mainly having to do with education. Starting August 19th is when we intend to get into discussions about what are we going to recommend to the board. And then obviously forward, we'll get further and further into the details, and we'll probably need to break it down into different topics. I'm thinking of, we definitely want to have some discussion about the stations. I'm not sure how much impact we can have on where the stations are located, but we probably have some really good input on what the stations would act like and look like. And then the specific route obviously is a huge one. I think we're all been chomping at the bit to try to make some recommendations or have some input or get some more information specifically on the route, the LPA. And then there's probably 101 other things that we could bring into the equation there. So those are all the August 19th, September 2nd, October and November meetings. So thank you for all that. Dana?
Yeah, so that is all let's see, I can pull back up the agenda. So I think, we are at almost 9 o'clock. I thank everyone, for hanging in there with us. Why don't we do this? We've got the meetings for the upcoming next 6 months or so, hammered out. I'll send that out to everyone. And in terms of topics and frequencies, we can hash that out and maybe have a robust discussion about that at our next meeting in July. But that is in terms of what I have for you, I think everything else can be shelved since it's late.
Thank you, Dana. One last thing I forgot to bring up a minute ago. We had a brief mention in our call today, just between me and Dana, about whether that July 15th meeting would be necessary. What are your thoughts on that at this point? Is that just kind of what you were just saying?
Yeah, I mean, my personal take is I think we have a lot of information. I think we can, Susan and I and Jay and Shana can sort of put our heads together and sort of, I think, elaborate on some of the questions and get some more feedback, perhaps go through the original LPA, not the LPA that's proposed, but the original LPA with y'all, that we do have, a map, that you may want to see. So those are my thoughts, and we can run it by you, Bill. And if you feel like it's too thin, we can cancel that meeting. But I think we have, as I was taking notes tonight, I definitely have some thoughts on how to fill that time. And I think you all as a committee didn't get a chance to talk much tonight. I think you're giving Andy, lots of leeway to give us that lots of information. So I think it would be, it could be beneficial to have sort of a download of all that information.
And
That's fair.
in the next couple of days, everyone received that purple map, the purple line map that Andy showed. You should have gotten that in your email from Shana. So the next couple of days, if you want to pull that up and look at it and email Dana or Shana some questions, that can also help guide our discussion for the next time.
You can also give me a buzz if you need, if that's easier. I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you. With that, do we need to vote to adjourn? I don't know what the rules are of a task force. Okay, well, we'll just bid everybody a good evening, and thanks for your time.